Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pitts, the Ukraine War Frontline update for the 1st of October 2023. Sort of frontline, I mean it is a frontline update, but I just also want to go through the new map that I am going to be using in my frontline updates, and a massive thanks to JR, who's been helping me with this. He's been such a legend in the time he's given to putting this together. Now, it is a work in progress. Just before we go on, look, if you want to know what my lines mean, this is what the lines mean. Check out the map key here, pause the video, so on and so forth. Right. Now, as we go into the map, there are some lines here that won't be here soon, but this is the map as I'm using it now. It is just to give some of you who might care an understanding what's going on. This is Google Earth, right? This is available as a kind of browser-based program. There's a separate program, but I prefer the browser-based so I can use it in conjunction with other things on the browser. It means that on the browser version doesn't have quite as many things you can do as you can in the standalone program, but whatever. And there's another program called Google Maps. As you know, Google Maps, you use it to drive around and know where you're going and whatnot. So Google Maps is where you produce maps and then you can import them into or view them in Google Earth. So I'm viewing a map that we have created. I say we, that's the royal we. He has created in Google Maps. And when you create it in Google Maps, you can import data from other maps and open source sources. And what that means is that instead of you having to go through all the painstaking hours and hours and hours, hundreds of hours of putting in small bits of trench line, if someone else has done that, then you don't want to reinvent the wheel. You take their open source data and you can import it. So we now have data imported from different mappers and sources that allow us to synthesize those data points and kind of conclusions, if you like, and bits of information, and put them all together and say, right, this is our map, and this is what we find useful to present to you. Now, what we have, as you know, Andrew Perpetua, the pro-Russian but objective mapper. We have Suryat Maps, pro-Ukrainian objective mapper. Suryat Maps, a pro-Russian mapper, and Deep State Map, the pro-Ukrainian mapper. Those are the three maps that we draw from. But Deep State Map, we have the prior to the counteroffensive line, which is a white line. And then we have the red line of Suryat Maps, and then we have the blue line of Andrew Perpetua. However, at the moment, it's a little bit confusing because there's a further blue line in some places just behind this kind of defensive line of the Russians. Now, that won't be there by the end of this week, hopefully. That is just the way the data's been imported, and we can merge some different polygons, different shapes, so that it all becomes one. But at the moment, it is a little bit confusing because there are two blue lines. You just forget the innermost blue line. You want to look at the outermost blue line. So Andrew Perpetua would say the Russian defensive line is here in the Kupiansk area, and Suryat Maps has their line here, and the May the 30th Deep State Map line before the counteroffensive is here, and these are all Russian defensive lines. So just to let you know, that's what's going on. As you can see, there's just a second blue line, not everywhere, but in a lot of these places. So some of these polygons will be sort of merged. Now, I would love to say, well, we should have got that ready before, showing this to you and using it as a map. But unfortunately, we'd be editing two maps if I was to continue editing in Google Earth and also editing in Google Maps as well. So it is what it is at the moment. Thank you to JR, because the work he's done is invaluable. Now, what's great is we can import other data sets, like in green. These are the trench lines that have been built. This is from Brady Afric and the work he's done, and this shows you where the fortifications have been built up and down the front line. As you can see, up in this Versk area, there's extensive trench lines, and behind Bakhmut as well, further back here. And as we come down, this was the original Surovikin line that then went also by all accounts, was either planned or has been built back along here towards Luhansk city. But I don't know. It's not marked on there, so I don't know if it is there, if it was planned but not built, or whether they just haven't mapped the satellite data there yet. And then as we come down to the Robotina area, you can see that that's pretty much the densest area of fortifications, and question marks over whether that was the most sensible place to attack. Anyway, that's what's going on with regard to my map. Sorry, a bit of just housekeeping there for you. Right. Now, when it comes to the front lines, there's not a lot of detail coming out. And I did a frontline update yesterday that my audio was rubbish because my mic had slipped. And I really apologize for that. Basically, what I was saying is that there is good rationale to think, and Andrew Perpetua was talking about this on his live stream, there's good rationale to think that the Ukrainians might have culminated. Culminated means you've run out of resources, energy, momentum, and you kind of grind to a halt. It doesn't mean you're losing. It doesn't mean you're being pushed back. You just can't push forward anymore. You need to regroup. You need more reinforcements or whatever you need, more supplies, and then after you've gathered yourself, you can push on again. But this kind of culmination wouldn't be something you could push on again in a few more weeks. You need a vast number of troops, and the problem is, as I was talking about yesterday, you really can't do a major counteroffensive that gets as far as Tokmak if you don't have air superiority. There's a contested airspace, and you cannot take ground with just infantry or infantry and artillery, where artillery is having to do what airframes would do. Artillery is trying to flatten places with smaller munitions than large bombs being dropped by planes, and you'd get a shed load of those bombs being dropped by planes, and you'd absolutely flatten areas of trench line. Well, you can't do that. You're firing much smaller pieces of ammunition, artillery ammunition at trench lines that don't fundamentally damage the trench lines, or like if you get a good hit, you're going to take out some soldiers, but really it's not going to threaten the integrity of those trench lines all that much. And they don't have, the Ukrainians just don't have vast amounts of artillery ammunition. I mean, that's a very well-known fact. So to expect them to follow these kind of NATO guidelines, but without superiority, and expect them to get, halfway to the coast by the end of autumn or whatever, is really unrealistic. And I think there's this realization possibly around about now. So the Russians have defended much better than people were expecting, or at least they are throwing troops and a kitchen sink into these trench lines, and that's all they need to be able to make it really grinding for the Ukrainians to take territory. So with these trench lines manned with pretty much everyone Russia can throw at them, you need to, in order to overcome them, you need a shed load of infantry yourself, and the Ukrainians just don't have that. You need to overwhelm them with huge amounts of mass here, and that's not going to happen. So as a result, the trench lines plus mines plus lots of people equals very difficult for the Ukrainians to overcome, because they have to do that by hand, basically, by boots on the ground in these trench lines, and that is very costly in terms of casualties and their own personnel. So that's my opinion. It might be wrong. I mean, it all depends whether there's a serious breakthrough. We've had hints of these breakthroughs and different claims that they've sort of broken through, but there's nothing that has forced the Russians into a kind of capitulation. But it might be close. So this isn't saying it's all doom and gloom. If the Russians were at a point where they just caved in a significant way in one or two places, then everything could be completely different, and it might be like a case of the dam breaking. And that's the hope still in the Verbove and Novoprokopivka area. I don't know that is going to happen or is likely to happen, but that is certainly still the hope. Right, sorry, it's a lot of me sort of banging on about generalities there. Let's go to the northeast axis from Kupiansk to Svatova to Crimea here. And we'll go into the ISW to begin with, and they say the Institute for the Study of War, American military think tank, footage published on September the 30th purportedly shows elements of the Moscow Volunteer Battalion assaulting and capturing a Ukrainian position near Crimea. Now, purportedly is an important word here because I don't think it does show this. The Russian Ministry of Defense reportedly formed the Moscow Volunteer Battalion in January 2023. And the volunteer detachment consists of athletes and Russian soccer fans. So it's almost like one of these ultra-nationalists maybe or hooligan kind of groups of soldiers. Now, the footage is this. I could show you this. It's basically lots of trees and then machine guns firing at trees. And what it says, what the Russian Telegram channel here says, is unique footage of the assault on the armed forces of Ukraine by the Moskva battalion near Crimea. I don't even know you can call it assault. All you actually see here are, there's a heavy machine gun firing into a forest. There's no movement. There's literally just someone talking, and then a guy next to him with a rifle of some type, and they're firing, and there's a couple of different shots from different places basically doing the same stuff. Video the battle through the eyes of the fighters. The intensity of the fire is very high, almost continuous shooting. After a tough firefight, the armed forces of Ukraine could not withstand the onslaught of our military and abandoned their positions, leaving a large number of wounded in the trenches and dugouts. According to captured Ukrainians, problems with the supply and management of units are also superimposed on difficulties with mobilization. A significant number of armed forces of Ukraine in the Svatova and Crimea directions are men of pre-retirement age. In other words, older soldiers, not young, youthful, sort of vigorous soldiers. This is RT footage and a Telegram channel that seems pretty propagandistic. Now, this could well have happened. This could be entirely accurate. But the footage does not show any of those claims whatsoever, which is why the ISW says purportedly shows this. It doesn't show that. It's just machine guns firing. Now, whether the Russians have taken those positions and whether they have taken prisoners and those prisoners are complaining about these things, I don't know. Who knows? But it could just be Russian psyops as well. Right. With regard to the rest of what they say, the Russian military has reportedly deployed elements of the newly created 25th Combined Arms Army. We talked about this last week, along the front line in the Kupiansk-Liman direction. Yevlasha is a spokesperson for this area. Ukrainian reported on September the 30th that Ukrainian forces have observed a total of 12,000 25th CAA personnel along the front line in the Kupiansk-Liman direction, and that the 25th CAA consists of mobilized personnel and personnel from heavily degraded units that have completely lost their combat capabilities. Yevlash also stated that the 25th CAA has unspecified weapons, logistics, and personnel problems. Okay. So, on the one hand, Yevlash's spokesperson is saying there's a large number of Russian troops around here, but on the other hand, they are poor quality, cobbled together from degraded units, and have unspecified but general problems with logistics, equipment, so on and so forth. So, yes, make of that what you will. That could well be again psyops from the Ukrainians there. There is a high probability that is at least partially true from what we know about the fact that these guys have been newly assembled. They have been kind of thrown into this, by all accounts, without adequate preparation, and they are relieving, I believe, other more experienced forces that have been sent further down to the south. And this has led the ISW, for example, to posit that potentially the counteroffensive up here has kind of gone nowhere and will go nowhere because they've taken the forces that were doing that, moved them elsewhere, and have replaced them with the 25th Combined Arms Army that isn't all that. Right, as we come down south, we come past Siversk and to the north of Bakhmut. And if you want to see an argument between myself with Andrew Perpetua against Suryat Maps and Weeb Union, you can go onto my Twitter account and check that out. And Andrew Perpetua was using as an example of Suryat Maps' lack of accuracy and swallowing what the Russian Ahmadis say, as opposed to looking at kind of objective data like shelling and looking at videos with a more critical eye. I've told you that Surat Maps said that the Russians took this part of Orikova Vasilivka. But Andrew Perpetua said, well, that video was green grass from May of this year. That's 5 months old, and that doesn't at all refer to what's happened in the last week. So he's saying that that's incorrect, and it's going to be this line back here, this blue line, not that inner one. So that's what we're going to get sorted. But the Russians, according to Andrew Perpetua, are much further back here than what Surat Maps states in that area. And then when we go to the Klishchivka area here, we have a little bit of movement, some gains according to Deep State Map, the yellow line here around the water features, these reservoirs and lakes by Klishchivka. There are varying claims about Klishchivka. So the ISW states that a Russian news aggregator claimed on the 29th of last month that the Ukrainian forces control only half of Klishchivka and that the other half is grey zone. Yevlash also stated yesterday that Ukrainian artillery continues to target the highway coming south from Opitny, which is a key logistics line. So that is, we'll have a tile overlay if I can sort that out. No, okay. No, it was a layer. So there we have the road coming south from Opitny. This is the road that is being hammered by Russian artillery, by all accounts. But there are some claims that the Russians, or at least half of Klishchivka, is still a grey zone. There was an attack over the railway line to the north of Klishchivka, and the Russians counterattacked. So unsure exactly what's going on and who is where in that particular area. ISW continues that a Russian mill blogger claimed that Russian forces pushed Ukrainian forces back from the railway east of Klishchivka. A Russian news aggregator claimed on the 29th that Russian forces were entrenched at the railway near Klishchivka and counterattacked near Andriivka. So claims that the Russians are counterattacking. There are other claims that the Ukrainians have been advancing towards Odradivka. I guess there's going to be fog of war, OPSEC, and both sides are going to be claiming, one over on the other side. So I don't know exactly where the lines would be and who is correct in their claims, but it is probably quite dynamic around the railway line here, with the Ukrainians having some success and momentum, but the Russians then pushing back with their counterattack, defense by counterattack. And so you can imagine they probably are throwing a lot of effort into taking back some of their lost positions. They do have some considerable forces in the Bakhmut area. It's a place that they don't want to lose, having taken such a lot of effort and casualties to gain it. Okay, as we come down to Avdiivka, not a huge amount to say of Avdiivka. Usual kind of repelled attacks in all these kind of normal places, Opitny, Pervomaisky, so on and so forth. Not too much detail to talk about, but I will move on. And we'll come down to some fairly significant Russian gains here. Well, I say fairly significant. I don't know if this is a kind of rejig or a counterattack, but it has taken this sort of fortification there in this tree line. So this is by Solodka, and this is a sort of area we have seen where the Russians have been using kind of kamikaze tanks and whatever in some of these areas. This is actually south of Novomykhailivka on the way to Vuhledar. But yeah, so the Russians, according to Andrew Perpetua, are in control of this whole rectangle there and that little bit at the top. That is to go in line with what Surat Maps is saying. That's why I say it could be a rejig, because actually Surat Maps already had that. So I don't know if it's something that's happened over the last 24, 48 hours, or just more information coming in for Andrew Perpetua, and Surat Maps had it right there previously. As we move to the west along the southern front, not a lot of movement in the maps, as you can see. Or actually, oh goodness me, I forgot to actually... I will go back to Bakhmut. I have rushed through in my attempt to get further to the south too quickly. I just want to say that in the Bakhmut-Klishchiivka area, Global War Monitors just come out and said Ukraine has managed to cross the railway north of Andriivka. So that is a claim of some success actually in this area. So the area that Deep State Map is talking about, and it could basically be as a result of Deep State Map, that could be just using Deep State as a source. Reporting from Ukraine's video last night was about this area. As you can see, you've got Klishchiivka here, and they were talking about how there are three different levels of munitions ordnance are hammering the Russians. So you've got sort of mortars all the way up, mortars and drones. You've got artillery and more ranged artillery, and then going back to sort of HIMARS and whatnot. And they're really sort of hammering, supposedly, the Russians in that area. Go and watch reporting from Ukraine to get an idea of what the Ukrainians are trying to achieve there and what they're doing. But nonetheless, that's that area. This is back to Velika Novosilka, and the ISW says of this area that a Russian mill blogger has claimed that Ukrainian forces have attacked near Pryutne in 3 small groups of 15 personnel each. So again, that's fairly small. It's not like they're doing huge attacks in this area. This is Pryutne there, where the Russians. There's a couple of polygons here, necessarily so, but. This outer line is where the Russians are, and they push back the Ukrainians north of Pryutne, and the Ukrainians might well be trying to do a counterattack there to push the Russians back to where they had been. And then we have the ISW continuing with a Russian mill blogger claimed that Russian forces are conducting localized offensive operations from Pryutne in the direction of Rivnepil and are counterattacking near Urzhainy. Russian mill bloggers claim that Russian aviation struck a bridge across the Shaitanka River in Velika Novosilka. So the Russians are doing a lot of counterattacking themselves. They are also using aviation extensively right across the front line. And this is, again, an issue with the Ukrainians not having air superiority, which means that there is an asymmetry here where the Russians can use their FAB 500 bombs and just general aviation munitions to strike at the Ukrainians along the front line and behind the front line. They're using aviation to hit a whole host of places. Last week I was talking about how they hit 3 places along back from Mariinka, all the way back, I think, to Konstantinopil there. Aviation is being used extensively, and that is a challenge for the Ukrainians. Right, now we're going to come down to the Robotyne area, where a few of the sources are saying Ukrainian defenders have made tactical or positional gains north of Donetsk and south of New York. So that is actually going further over to actually Donetsk area. I've got that in the wrong place. That is over in this area that there could be some gains. It's not particularly detailed today. Ukrainian forces repelled attack by the Russian invaders near Novoselivska and East of Stepova. So sorry, I missed that out. That's actually all the way back up here near New York in that kind of area. So I'm all over the shop today. Sorry, it's a late one. Right, back to where I thought I was, which is the Verbove area. Here, Global War Monitor says, a Russian telegram reports heavy fighting near Novofedorivka and Verbove. So we have heard this previously. And in fact, Andrew Perpetua has some gains here just north of Verbove. Novofedorivka is over in this direction. And we have heard that the Ukrainians are pushing there. There was talk about a potential encirclement of a unit here, the 56th, I think it was, here of the Russians, and being cut off from another Russian unit. But I think that's more of a pipe dream. But there is heavy fighting there. Some Ukrainian gains. But the question is, is there enough? Are these just kind of tactical gains, much smaller? Advances only in a few areas, or these large-scale advances where the Ukrainians are really pushing the Russians back? And I think it's probably the former rather than the latter, sadly enough. But yeah, fighting still in these areas. This source says the Ukrainians are pushing in the Tokmak direction. The Ukrainians increase pressure towards Novofedorivka. There is success. Of course, that's a pretty general, vague claim. That's a success that Andrew Perpetua is sort of agreeing with as well. Up there, or it might even come from his claims. I don't know. That's that area between Novopokrovka and Verbove. As you can see, the green lines here on my map signify the trench lines. We still don't have too much change from the trench lines here. So you've got the tank ditch and Dragon's Teeth as that line, and then you have the manned trench back here where the Ukrainians have pushed the Russians back to Verbove, and there is supposedly fighting on the outskirts of Verbove and fighting on the outskirts of Novopokrovka. But Andrew Perpetua said in the last few days that indicated that the Ukrainians have been pushed back further to the north and towards Robotine again. So, the question is, do the Ukrainians have enough in the tank to be able to push the Russians back? Are the Russians close to breaking at all, or is this just a massively grinding area that is just only going to really be broken with the use of really decent air attacks? I don't know. Right, Kherson area. Russian mill bloggers claimed on September 30th that the Russian military command removed the commander of the Russian 205th Motorized Rifle Brigade following recent outrage from mill bloggers about the brigade's command. This was to do with, I don't know if you remember, over the Dnipro River, there were some issues with attacks that were badly carried out, and then they were cut off and whatnot. I think it's the 205th that were involved in that. So the same group of Russian mill bloggers extensively amplified reports about elements of the 205th suffering significant losses due to inadequate artillery support and poor leadership in the Kherson direction in late August. One of the Russian mill bloggers stated on September the 30th that the removal of this commander is a rare case in which truth and justice prevailed. The removal of the commander suggests that Russian ultra-nationalist outrage may still be able to pressure the Russian military command despite the apparent decline in such reactions in the wider Russian information space since Wagner Group's rebellion. And some interesting discussion on Ukraine the latest. I think when they were interviewing ISW, people working for ISW, talking about how the Russian mill blogger space has definitely changed. When you've got Evil Gherkin being arrested, when you've got Prigozhin being killed, it's not quite as openly critical as it has been, and it's I don't know that we'll get as many of the realist doom posting that we have seen from some of the mill bloggers, so it's probably more likely to toe the party line with regard to what the Russian MOD want them to say. But yes, I mean, if you want to go and check out recent episodes of Ukraine the latest, well worth listening to every day. That's it. There's not, there's a lot of me just having a talk about the map and stuff there. Hopefully it grounds you guys for the rest of the week and lets us know where I'm going with the help of JR. He is holding my hand and leading me here, so thank you to him. I wouldn't be able to cope without his help and others as well. And also, with regard to my channel being targeted by Russian trolls and through Indian entities as well, Combat Veteran Reacts has had exactly the same issue, and I think other channels as well. So he's done a video about that. I've done my own video about that. This is a targeted attack on pro-Ukrainian YouTube channels. So, on one hand, it's horrible for Combat Veteran Reacts and any channel, but on the other hand, it's nice, I guess. I don't mean it like that, but it is nice to know that there are other people experiencing this, and I'm not just going mad. I guess that my worst suspicions have been kind of realized there, but yes, so we'll see where that develops. I'd like to get hold of Ukraine the latest. I've tried to sort of message them on Twitter, say, look, there's there's a story in this. This is the pro-Ukrainian information space. This is the 5th generation warfare. This is a battle going on that I think is significant and is worthy of reporting. So it'd be interesting if they get back to us. Anyway, thank you so much for your support. You take care. I'm going to list some people who require, really, they warrant me giving them some special shout outs for their support. So I'll do that tomorrow. In the meantime, take care. Toodle pip. Speak soon.